Tonight we are very pleased to have you with us. Welcome from Wheaton Public Library and the DuPage Art League. Tonight, Nancie King Mertz is with us as our guest artist. Nancie is a master member of the Pastel Society of America and the Chicago Pastel Painters. She is a master circle member of the International Association of Pastel Societies and was designated as one of their 15 eminent pastelists worldwide. Known for her cityscapes, Nancie can be found painting downtown, under the L, or on the median of a busy street. She was twice named Chicago Artist of the Year by the Convention and Tourism Bureau. Much of her local work has been featured on Chicago-based TV series and ads. Also intrigued by the landscape and architecture, her pastel workshops are offered across the United States and in Europe, and now via Zoom. In May of 2021, she will be the guest of honor of Art du Pastel en France in Giverny, France, the home of Monet, where she will exhibit her work, teach, and paint in his gardens. Nancie and her husband Ron own Art de Triomphe and Artful Framer Studios in Chicago's Lakeview East neighborhood, where her originals are featured, along with the G-clay prints Ron produces of her work. Pastel supplies are available there too. Their shop is open 7 days a week. And now I will turn the mic over to Nancie and we will get started. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on behalf of the library in Wheaton and also the DuPage Art League. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm so thrilled that people from all over the country have logged in tonight. And I am sure that a lot of you are pastelists and some of you are just interested. Some patrons, I think, logged on. Thank you for that. So I just want to go over the tips that are appearing in the chat, and I think you got the tips earlier today. In case you're not real familiar with pastels, I just want to make sure everybody understands a bit about them and the process and how we work. So soft pastels are pure pigment. It's the same pigment that you find in oil paint. It just doesn't have anything that dilutes it other than just a tiny bit of binder to keep it in a stick form. So it's not chalk. Chalk is limestone and dye. Pastel is pure pigment. So that's why you get the rich, pure colors. And I always remove the papers from pastels, and I use them like a wide brush. I use the side and rather than the tip to try to, get a stroke like a painting. And pastel works are called paintings. Often people think they're drawings, but they are paintings. And you want your marks to show, so that's another reason to use the side of the stick. It's all about mark making instead of brush work that you often associate with oil painting. So it's, the mark making is what kind of indicates your style. So you can, a lot of us who've been painting in pastels for years can look at someone's work on Facebook or in a magazine and know immediately who it is just because of the way their marks are made. And it's important to, for those of you that do paint, when you're thinking about shadow and light on a surface, say it's a grassy surface and a tree is shadowing part of it and the sun is hitting another part, the local color is typically green, especially if you live in the Midwest. And you need to make that dark color just a version of that local color. So, you paint the shadow a dark green and the light a much brighter, warmer green. So often people will put shadows in as purple or blue. It's the same substance, so you need to keep the color, the local color, so it relates to each other. And you try to think only in shapes at the beginning of a painting. You want to block things in. You don't put the detail in at the beginning because you're going to be painting over that. So I always call the detail the dessert. So you save the dessert for last and put those little details in it at the end. So for a dynamic composition, you want to think about the ratios of value, intensity of color, and the temperature. So you want to keep, if you're doing a darker painting or a nocturne, the value is very dark, and then you have just a portion of that in intense light. Same with the intensity of color. You don't want the entire piece to have a lot of intensity of color. Just save the intensity of color for the area that is your center of interest. And then the temperature, you want it to be predominantly warm with a little bit of cool, or predominantly cool with a little bit of warm. So if you have these things in equal measure, you don't have a real compelling composition. So be thinking about making those adjustments as you paint. So when I start my process, which is what I'll demonstrate tonight, is I begin with what I call a tick mark map. And I use vine charcoal, and I just indicate by actually kind of hitting the charcoal against the surface rather than drawing it in. It helps me determine direction, helps me with the perspective, and it allows me to get everything in on that surface that I want to include. I've found over years of painting, and I've been painting forever, that if I just started painting, I run out of surface. So the tick mark map helps kind of reel me in and keeps me on track of what I want to include. And then I block in the dark shapes only. I always work dark to light. And with the darks, once they're in, I wash them in with denatured alcohol. And that's the alcohol that you buy at a hardware store. You can use rubbing alcohol, you can use turpentine, but denatured alcohol is 99% alcohol, so it's a fuel, and it dries very quickly. So that's my choice of moisture to get the pastels washed in. And then once that's dry, then I start with the midtones, and then the lights toward the end and details at the very last. So that's kind of the process I'll demo tonight. And please, my husband Ron is here. He's answering the questions, or asking the questions that you submit, and then I will answer them as I paint. So don't be shy. And this is very casual. So please, I want you to get as much from this as you can. And also, if you want to go to my website, which is nanciekingmertz.com, I have mentoring minutes for students. If you need help with a painting, I offer mentoring minutes. So that's on my website under teaching and products. And also have a workshop painting Greece coming up the middle of August, and then one on painting New Orleans in October. So all that information is on the website, and then also the products that I use are there too. So, and also a video. So, all right, let me show you my setup. I've got to move my camera briefly just to show. All right, so
we have an initial question: is what's your favorite paper?
So I use this is 400 UArt. It's sanded paper. I mount it either to Gator board or 8-ply rag board. And because I have a frame shop, I have a dry mount press, so I have that advantage of mounting the paper. And I buy it in a great big roll and cut it to size. Often, I'll have a frame I want to use, and so I just make the panel to that size.
It's blurry.
Okay. Whoop. I don't know why it's blurry. These are the pastels I use. I have 4 sets that the Richardson Company had me select. So I have 2 that were selected for the Florida coast. One is Stunning Skies and Water. One is Lush Coastal Landscapes. So those are on the left side. And I've merged them together to get all the blues together, all the greens together, the warms together, just so when I'm grabbing for a pastel, I can quickly access them. I don't have to search the box. And then on the left side are my first 2 sets. They had me selected urban landscape and atmospheric landscape. And again, those 2 are merged. So these are the pastels that I use. I take a pair of them with me when I do any plein air painting, any demos, when I travel. So those are the ones I use. And I also use their hard pastels. Those are here. And I use them at the end. Often pastel instructors will suggest that you start with the hard pastels and finish with the soft. And I just do it the opposite way. I use the hard pastels more for detail at the end, or if I don't quite have the color I need, sometimes I can get the color from the hard pastels I need. So just want to make sure I have this adjusted right. Oops. Okay, hopefully everyone can see. So doing a cityscape tonight, and this is an old photo I really liked of a downtown area looking west. Some guys are working up here. I love to paint the bridges and overpasses and the L, under the L and so forth. And then I always love this long view of the city. So this is a great example of one-point perspective. Everything's going to converge down to this one point in the distance. And if you are struggling with perspective, let me grab this book. This is a book I recommend to all my students, and it's available through Dover Books. And it's very complete drawings. It's good explanation. It's easy to understand. So if you're struggling with perspective, do yourself a favor and, you know, get a book and just do some exercises from that book. And also, I'd be happy to have you in a workshop because I always help people with perspective in workshops.
I have a couple of questions. When you run out of a certain color, how do you know the number you need if you take out the wrapper?
You know, I've never tried to keep track of pastel colors. I just, I have so many pastels that I can always replace with something that I have. You know, sometimes I'll drop one on a concrete on the street or something and it'll just, you know, smash to smithereens. And then I try to you know, replicate that. I'll make a little note on the paper or someplace to try to bring that color back into my set. So yeah, a lot of people like to really keep track of their pastel sticks and inventory them and catalog them and so forth. And I just always find another color that I like equally as well. So,
in your experience, can you make your own pastel sticks, or you recommend purchasing it?
I tried that one time. I would never do it again. It was, I made a big mess of it, but a lot of people love to do that. And that's what artists used to do back in the day. So, I mean, it's a great experiment if you're willing to try it, but it's just easier to, I think my time is more valuable than trying to make those sticks. So just, you know, we'll get additional sticks at, you know, from the store, or just open another box from our shop and start with some fresh ones. Okay, so I'm going to just start with the tick mark map, and it's just a piece of vine charcoal that I just kind of lay in here, get the direction. I want these guys in here, but I don't want them to be smack dab, you know, in the center. So just lay in the pastel, or I'm sorry, lay in the charcoal before the pastel. I'm not really drawing, I'm just kind of hitting it. And everything's going to converge down to my vanishing point's right about there. So everything will converge down to that point.
Can you show the reference photo at the same time?
I can't. There's not, I don't have split screen. So I can show it again. I can show it periodically.
Put it on the other side.
Does it show here?
Yeah.
Okay. So the vanishing point, the bottom, or on the flat ground plane, the buildings all recede back there. Cars in a different plane, so it won't recede back there. It's turning actually.
Are you using new pastels now?
This is charcoal. This is fine charcoal that I'm just. This is the tick mark mat that I'm just very lightly sketching in here. Okay, so that's all I need to get started. I know where the darks are going to go. I know that I have my vanishing point lined up where I want things to go, the direction I want it to go. So now I start with the darks.
Do you recommend a good shade box for pastel and plein air, please?
I like the Sienna system that the Jack Richardson company also sells. They have a wonderful pastel pochade system, and then they have a great tripod that's very sturdy, and they have an adjustable panel holder that often plein air setups don't allow for very large panels, but this one expands to a really huge size. I should find out exactly how big. But it requires a tripod, and the bigger pochade box requires a tripod. There's also a pastel box that can hang off the front of your tripod. And when I travel like to Europe to teach, that's what I take because it is so compact. Everything that I travel with fits into a rolling cart, and you put it in the overhead bin. Or, go down the subway with it. If I'm painting in New York, it's just, I've just pared things down so that it's very manageable.
Is the first color you were using, is that eggplant?
No, it's more of a purple. I know the colors are kind of skewed when you're viewing them through a webcam. And this is just this color that looks like black is not black. It's just a really deep plum. This is more of it's like a kind of a dark purple.
Do you normally prefer to work for photos or sketch on location? I know this is a demo, but it's difficult to sketch on location.
Well, I actually do completed paintings on location, which I prefer to do because you can see the color so much better when you're painting plein air, and you just have such a connection to that piece because you remember what the air feels like, what the smells, the sounds, what people say to you when you're out painting. So that's my preferred method of working is to paint plein air. So about 70% of my work is plein air. Of course, this year I haven't been able to go out much, and we do have a wonderful group that's very well organized for plein air painting. Plein air painters out of Chicago, is the name of our group. And, you know, we exhibit together, we paint together. And if any of you are local, I would highly recommend joining our group, because there's safety in numbers, and plus you get, you know, great feedback, great opportunities to share together.
A similar question, do you prefer plein air versus painting from photos?
I do. I prefer plein air, absolutely. Just for those reasons that I listed. You see color so much better, and you're just more connected to the painting.
Says, I love your urban stuff, but do you normally use an underpainting?
Yeah, so the way I'm demoing tonight is how I paint plein air and how I paint in the studio. I do the tick mark map.
Blocking?
I do the tick mark map and the starting with the darks. I wash them in. I take the alcohol with me when I travel. I smuggle it in because it's, you know, it's not really wise probably to have it on my carry-on, but I do take it with me.
Says your photo appears not to show much color. How will you choose those local colors?
Well, I'm seeing lots of blue and purple in the photo, and then lots of orange, and then wonderfully subdued colors of, in the distance, of orange, violet, blue. So hopefully everything's going to relate and be cohesive as I go.
Okay.
That's too light.
Okay.
So I'm getting close to wanting to wash in.
Since plein air is great, but the light changes. How long does it normally take you to do a plein air?
I try to do it within 2 hours, just because the light changes. And, you know, you want to try not to chase the light.
Says,
So,
okay, go ahead.
just establish, you know, if something's going to, like if you're going to incorporate a delivery truck or something, get that in first so that, you know, if it's going to disappear, you have it. If there's a shadow, strong shadow that you really like, if that draws you to the place that you're painting, you know, get that in. Just work as quickly as you can to get in what drew you to that scene.
Would it be possible to shift the camera so there's more Nancie's left coming in at more of an angle?
Let's see. No, let me see if I can. If I get it too close, you won't be able to see the entire image. It looks straight on from our view. And I'll send you, or I'll, you know, when I'm done, I can post a picture of it, and it'll be on the website too, so you can see very clearly what it looks like.
He says, well, not a question. I love the energy you get from the pastels, the movement and the texture.
Good. Yeah, it's really a fun medium because it's so immediate. You can just, you know, pick up a color and go. You don't have to stand and mix a color. But this is when it gets really messy, and everybody, if they're watching us paint outside, this is when they walk away shaking their heads because I turn it into a hot mess at this point. So this is where I wash in with the denatured alcohol. And I try to do verticals when, I'm doing structures, because often those lines help me put windows in the distance. If I'm painting the L, it helps me get the wires, and often this shows at the end through the painting. This underpainting shows.
Because the basic values are already telling the story. It looks good.
Well, good. Thank you. Give me the confidence to go on.
And then a question, is that a fan brush?
Yes. Oh, this is a number 6 Gray Matters fan brush, also from Richardson. Yeah, I love the effect that the fan brush creates. And, it's great for creating grasses. Let's see. Oh, reflections in the water.
Talking a little bit. And then the question, what brand of pastels do you use or recommend? What is the difference between hard pastels and soft pastels?
Okay, so the ones I use for all my workshops and demos and plein air are the Jack Richardson pastels that I showed you at the beginning. They had me select 4 sets, an urban set, an atmospheric landscape set, and those are the 2 that I pair together when I take them out. And then they had me recently select 2 Florida or coastal sets. I was supposed to teach a bunch of workshops in the South, and that was in March. That all got canceled, but I have these great pastels that they had me pick, and so I paired those 2 together. And so I used those are all soft, and then I also use their hard pastels.
You mentioned atmospheric. What does atmospheric mean?
Well, atmospheric perspective is the perspective you see in the distance, because there's so much atmosphere between us and seeing off in the distance, like mountains will appear violet or blue. They may be green. If you were up on that mountain, you might see a lot of vegetation, but because there's so much atmosphere between you and what you're seeing in the distance, that's considered atmospheric perspective. So everything's, the colors are muted, subdued. Typically you don't see real dark values in the distance because of the atmosphere. The particles of moisture and the dust and, sunlight glinting through can make all those things much more subdued. So this is just about dry.
These contrasting values are so important. Surprise, blending the initial massing in with alcohol. Wow.
So this is a very fast approach. You have a lot of your values in there from the get-go once you wash them in, and they're connected too. So that's an important thing to do when you're composing your work, is to connect the darks. If you have a little bit of dark here and a little bit of dark here and a little bit of dark here, it's real spotty, and you don't have a real cohesive composition. So try to connect your darks, and it's so easy to paint mid values and light values over the darks versus the other way around. It's hard to paint dark over light with pastel or with oil paint. It gets kind of muddy. You pick up those darks with the lights, but it's the lights you can slather over the top. And I always tell students that the lighter the value, the heavier the application. So these darks are pretty transparent, and there's not a lot of pastel that comes off on my hand. Oh, my hands are filthy, because they're washed in. And so I'm going to very easily be able to go over it with the mid values, and then towards the end I'll really put the light values in. Although often I will do the sky early on, just because the lights trickle down over the darks, and then I have to keep tapping it, to get to knock the loose lights off from the darks. So I'll probably, get the sky in. But all this, I don't know if you can see all this. All these buildings in the distance are just so beautifully subtle. They're just value shapes that slightly change in temperature and value. They're very, very similar, but just a tiny shift is going to make them be real interesting. And I just love that portion of this image. And that's kind of my focal point. These guys will draw some attention, but they're so dark, these figures up here. But I think this is going to be more the center of interest.
So what is your brush when washing with alcohol? How wet is your brush?
Oh, at this stage, it's pretty wet. When I use the fan brush later, for like if I had grasses that I wanted to paint towards the end, or wanted to do reflections in the water, if there were water, I just will put the tips in, just barely dampen the tips. And if it's reflections in the water, I just go, back and forth horizontally to get that wavy motion of the water. If I'm doing grasses, just having the tips wet, and I just go up, kind of like what I did here. And those verticals are going to help me define those buildings in the distance.
It says, do you think you get your atmospheric feeling from the alcohol?
I think it helps. There's not really pigment that was applied here. I just came up from the pigment that was applied, and that's just the wash. So that's going to give me some of the atmospheric feeling that I need back there.
Says, I really think your success is very dependent on your ability as a photographer. Not being a great photographer, I would like to know what you are thinking when you take your photos.
Well, I'm not a great photographer either at all, but I'm looking at light and shadow and a story. In this photo, the guys are working up here, or not working. They're maybe standing around, and it's end of the day. This looking west. You can tell by the light that it's end of the day. They're probably getting ready to clock out and go have a beer. So I don't know. I'm just always kind of inventing a story as I take a picture. Something has to really move me about what I'm seeing through the lens to snap that picture, even though everything's digital now and you're not investing in film and developing. I don't snap a picture unless I'm really inspired by what I'm seeing.
Again, could you explain the difference between hard pastels and soft pastels?
The hard pastels are, there's more binder in a hard pastel. So it makes it very rigid. It's usually in this shape. It's like a stick with sharp sides, and it's very, very handy to use for lines, for getting detail. Sometimes I'll use it to make windows. they're handy to use. And sometimes there's a color in the hard pastels that I don't have in my set of, let's see, I have, each set of 4 is 80, and sometimes you just don't have the color you need, and you will sometimes find it in your hard pastels. And when I go out plein air painting, I just have the Richardson small box of 18, but I have broken them in 2 and paired up another color. So I end up with 36 different colors in the box of 18.
And a question I'm not sure about, it says, what was Josh's last name again?
What's that?
What was Josh, J-O-S-P-E-S-H, last name
I
again?
don't know. Are you referring to Jack Richardson, that company? I don't.
It was from a little while ago from Kim Long.
Okay, I don't know. Kim, you might rephrase your question. I'm not sure what you're asking, but I think Jack Richardson is the only name I've mentioned, maybe. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to put some sky in there. And often in a cityscape, the sky is kind of yellow down by the ground because of pollution, exhaust from cars. And then it gets a little peachy, especially this time of day. End of day, you have some peachy light, and then maybe blue would be up here. In this photo, it's all white, and that's what photos do. They make the darks black, and they make the lights white. And until you have a lot of plein air painting under your belt, you don't realize how different the colors are in a photo than they are in nature. So it's, even if you just go out with a little watercolor pad and just make color notes, it just helps you see color so much better.
Since here, maybe Kim Long is asking about the book On Perspective by Joseph D'Amelio.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So Joseph D'Amelio. So it's from Dover Publications. So let me know, Kim, if I've answered that for you.
Do you ever combine colors of your pastels should you not have the shade you need?
Yes, that's another wonderful thing about pastels is you can layer them and get the color you might need. So I'm painting with the side, the stick.
Go back and blocking.
And I'm using that under painting to describe this rail. I'm not going to, at this point, not going to draw the rail in, but just paint around the underpainting.
It says, how do you handle your start, like the dark block in, when the painting is predominantly light and in a high key? Blocking.
Well, hopefully there's some darks in your image somewhere, because you need, like I said early on, you need a ratio of, if it's a high key painting, 3/4 of it can be high key and light value, but you need about 1/4 of it to be a darker value. So you might have to push the values a bit to get that contrast.
Would you prefer that questions be held until the end of the process, or talk about it as you go along?
I'm happy to talk about it as I go, because that's probably when the questions arise. So, you know, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Sometimes I get caught up in what I'm doing. I forget to talk, or the wrong word comes out of my mouth because I'm focused on what I'm
Talking.
doing. But yeah, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so let's get some of this deep in here.
Talking. It's hard to see the light tones on the screen.
Yeah, they're not that much different than the value of the UArt paper. So it probably is hard to see them.
I don't know how you can talk about and do it at the same time. For me, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
That's now why I
Oh, I hear
could
ya.
be a teacher. Talking.
Yeah. In my recent workshop, I was talking and painting, and I called something a fish, and it had nothing to do with a fish. It's just like the wrong word came out. I don't know why. So, yeah,
Can you tell us what colors you're using as you paint?
I'll try. This is a real deep, like navy blue. You know, I don't have color names or numbers. And I know it's hard to see online, but making the best of this. Hope everybody's coping with all these changes we've had to make, but these Zoom classes work out great because the student has the camera right here, and you know, in a workshop situation, they're always looking over somebody's shoulder to try and see what's being demoed. So there are advantages. Plus, people from all over the country can gather.
Do you recommend using a ruler to get the straight lines?
If you need to, by all means. I try not to. It's, you know, one more thing to carry when you're going out to paint, but you know, there's nothing wrong with using a ruler. And sometimes when I'm working really large, I'll use a straight edge. And I always tell people not to blend too much. I tend to soften an edge with a finger without even realizing that I'm doing it. But, you know, the thing about pastels is it's mark making, and you want those marks to show. So if you blend and blend and blend, it's kind of like you've overpainted something. You can't enjoy those marks.
How do you decide where to start, then next, then next? I often feel overwhelmed with what to approach next.
Well, the process I use, you know, with the tick mark map and then starting with the darks, it just kind of leads me along the way. Helps me determine what needs to be painted next. So if you can kind of settle into a method, it should help you, you know, figure out the progression a little better.
Do you always use a smaller length pastel? Most are 2.5 to 3 inches in length.
Well, I use these Richardsons, and this is they're probably 1.25 inches. And I like that size. They're soft like Sennelier in some respects, but they don't crumble. And this, if I were painting in oil, which I also do, this would probably be the size brush I use.
Do you still need the picture on the left? If she put it back on the other side, I don't think she would be blocking it.
Exactly. Yeah. If I could move it back over here, I think I wouldn't keep popping into the camera. So I'll show you again the picture and then I'll move it over. Okay. And I'm just, again, thinking of this in value shapes at this stage. I'm not drawing in details at all. I'm just looking at the color, the hue, the value, thinking about that, and not thinking about details. You've got to build the base, put the drywall on before you put the cabinets on. So just tell yourself that if you get caught up in putting details in too soon.
Because half of our screen is the baskets on the left.
Oh. Okay.
Good shift in that.
Is that better?
I missed the name of the paper you use.
Oh, this is number 400 UArt. And I dry mount it to either Gator board or acid-free, rag board, 8-ply rag board. I started to say acid-free foam board, but that doesn't work very well if you're working very large because it can warp pretty easily. So I would say maybe max 11 by 14 if you're going to use acid-free foam board. Otherwise, it could warp on you.
You're putting in the midtones at this point, right?
I'm working back and forth with the midtones and reapplying some darks.
Do you use an air filtration system in your studio?
No, I do not. Until all this COVID stuff, I was outside painting with pastels so much. And I just, I do paint in my studio with pastels a lot. But this year it's been pretty much all indoors. So a filtration system would be nice, but I don't have one. I try never to blow on the pastels.
For those of us without a dry mount press, how would we mount the paper to the Gator board?
A good thing to use is this 3M spray. Comes in a green can, and there's a YouTube video of that UArt put out that shows, I just demo how to mount the paper. You want to wait it until it dries, and it dries pretty quickly. But it's messy, so make sure you have papers down and so forth. And use some parchment paper or something to lay over the surface that you've spray glued before you put a weight on top, or like if you use a book or something, it might stick to your surface, and you don't want that. I'm always keeping this vanishing point in mind. And using the side, always the side, to try to treat it like a brush.
Says I use Scotch 586 positional mounting adhesive. That's positionable mounting adhesive. It comes in a big roll, 24 inches wide. I lay my foam core and use a brayer type scraper to make it adhere.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's less messy than a spray, and it works just great. I do many panels to have them ready.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, just tell us, Ron, if you'll read that again, the brand.
It's a Scotch 586 positionable mounting adhesive.
Okay.
Is your vanishing point generally your focal point?
No. It's not. In one point perspective, it can often be, because everything leads to that point. I'm trying to think of an example. Sometimes, like if I'm doing if I'm on an L platform and I'm doing, the train and the tracks and what's below, there's lots of vanishing points. So, probably the L would be the center of interest, or, maybe light on the platform. So it's not necessarily the vanishing point that's the center of interest.
Going back to the mounting, it says you can also use self-adhesive paper products by 3M. YouTube video showing how Alan Picard, just thought I'd mention, up to you if you want to mention.
Okay, you want to read that again, Ron?
You can also use self-adhesive paper products by 3M. YouTube video showing how to by Alan Picard. Just thought I'd mention it. Up to you if you want to mention.
Thank you.
What size are you working on?
Oh, gosh. Let me see. I had a frame this size. It is 18 3/4 by 20 1/2.
Did you say you were using sanded paper? I worry you harm your skin.
Sometimes when I'm doing several paintings in a row, I do blow out the side of my finger. But I used to use 320. So the lower the number, the coarser the sandpaper. And this is all archival, so it's not just sandpaper that you get at the hardware store. Um, you know, it's the UArt sanded paper. So I now switched to 400, which is not as coarse as the 320 I was using. Because I really was,
Locking.
you know, I was joked that I could probably rob a bank because my fingerprints are gone. But
Locking. Referring back to the comment on Scotch 586 positionable mounting adhesive, it says, whoops, it's 568 568 Scotch. Sorry for the error.
that's okay. Thanks for sharing that tip. So I'm using my pinky as a guide along the edge of the board to help me get some verticals.
How often do you go in with alcohol to set the colors?
I usually just use the alcohol when I put the darks in. Like I mentioned, if I was doing a landscape with grasses, at the very end, I might, you know, go up with the brush to get some of the grasses to overlay, you know, the background. So that's at the end. Sometimes if I have a water scene with lots of reflections, at the end, I'll go sideways, horizontally with the brush and a little bit of alcohol to get those reflections. But I usually just use it kind of initially after I put the darks in to set those in there. But, you know, experiment and see how it works for you. That's just the way I happen to use it. Okay, I'm going to start getting some lights back in here.
What do you think about gesso with pumice on board?
That's good too. You can get some great effects with that. And for those of you that aren't aware of that, there's Golden has a product, Liquitex has a product, and it's called transparent gesso or gesso for pastels, and it has pumice in it. So you can, I like to use it on Gator board, and I like to use it for big pieces because I put it on with a wide brush, and you get all this great texture underneath. I also will squirt some maybe warm red or coral, just acrylic paint, like those little craft bottles of paint that you get, you know, to paint wood. And I squirt a little bit of that in there and just slap it around with a wide brush. And it just really can create some terrific underlying textures. And then you just paint over the top.
Says I use foam core here since I cannot get Gator board here. I use the double-sided adhesive 3M repositional, and the US is better, and adhere the paper to the board. I also let the board extend beyond the paper so that I can cut 2-inch matte frames that fit the background board and overlap the painting paper by 1/4 inch or so. Got the idea from Gail Sibley. Helen Picard is great, but cutting the backer board the same size as the painting makes handling the painting cumbersome.
And that's a good tip. Yeah, so often I am doing plein air events where you have to immediately frame your pieces. So, you know, I tend to work on a board that fits the frame I'm going to use for that reason. So, especially like in a quick draw situation, which is where you have 2 hours to do a painting, and then you've got to frame it and within the 2 hours and get it, you know, on an easel for somebody to judge it, and that's pretty hectic. So that's why I tend to work on a panel that fits the frame.
Lighting you use in your studio even right now to light up your work as you are painting?
Well, I have a bunch of overhead gooseneck track lights with just LED bulbs in them. And then I have a hot light over my pastels. It's on a gooseneck. And that's kind of, I think, daytime light. I'm introducing some of the lights over the midtones. And I'm not being, you know, a slave to the photo or a slave to, you know, how many windows are there. I'm just suggesting that there's value shifts and light.
Sandpaper allows so many more layers of pastel. Canson and the other student papers fill up too quickly. Gesso is good and is irregular, which is interesting, but may not be what you're looking for. Sandpaper at 400, 500, 600 hold many more layers and allow more bold mark making.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, experiment with different kinds of paper and see what you like. I used to work on Wallace paper, and that is no longer available, Kitty Wallace, and I like the UArt a lot. Richardson is coming out with a new pastel board, which will be nice. They're experimenting with that.
Okay. As I see you have covered up your vanishing point, do you need to refer to it again, or do you know where it is since once you have it put in the angles of the building?
Yeah, I know where it is, and so I try to always, you know, point my pastels in that direction. Just make sure things converge down there.
Okay. Okay.
So all of this kind of gets cleaned up as I get, you know, closer to completion. So kind of clean things up too with the hard pastels.
Shocking.
And I'm not worried about detail back here at all. I'm just thinking about the value shapes and just getting, you know, strokes of color in there that are, you know, subtle enough that you have this atmospheric perspective.
Shocking. Do you ever have to erase or make a major change? If so, how do you handle it?
Well, when I start with the tick mark map and the charcoal, it's easy to erase the charcoal. You know, you just smush it around with your fingers and just put another line where you need it to be.
Shocking.
If you know, work dark to light and you've washed in the darks, it's very easy to go over them with the mid-range values and the lights. But if, you know, if I needed to move the sky up here and I have this dark, it's really hard. That's going to be a blemish. So try to get your darks in first and then your lights, and you can put your lights, I said that backwards, put your lights in over the darks pretty easily. But again, with such contrast, this would be, it's probably hard for you to see that that's a really light peach. It would be hard to cover over that dark, even though it's not heavily applied. It's just, there's just such a difference in value. But it is easier to paint light over dark and dark over light. So I kind of screwed that up when I was, sorry, telling you that.
Shocking. 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 Shocking.
Any more questions, Ron?
What is the brand of fan brush?
It's a Richardson Gray Matters number 6 fan brush. We have those in our shop too. And they last so long. A lot of fan brushes get chewed up pretty quickly with the sanded paper, but these really do last.
Shocking.
And there's a lot of things in the distance, you know, you
Shocking.
can't tell what they are, and it doesn't matter. You just give them, you know, a value shape and suggest that it's a structure or suggest that it's a car. You don't have to make yourself crazy by trying to draw it exactly like a car, a tree, or whatever.
Okay.
Usually there's one side of the street that's warm because it's getting more light and one side that's cool. So I'm going to go back over this a little bit to make it cooler. But then there's also light that bounces back and forth. So especially onto the cool side from the warm side. So then I put some yellow in here. And sometimes just leaving the color of the paper can work.
Okay.
The UArt's kind of a naturally a kind of a creamy off-white, but I'm going to cover it up pretty much. So that's a yellow, like a real light lemon yellow. And you can see how hard I push in the lights versus the darks. I just kind of skim over the top because I wash them in with alcohol. But the lights, I really get in there and, you know, scrub them in. So the lighter the value, the heavier you can apply it.
Says your foreground color is fantastic.
Oh gosh, I haven't worked on it, but good. Hopefully I got the shape in pretty well.
Do you pre-select your colors as some artists do, or just wing it as you go, or do you set aside the sticks you've used so you can grab them again without searching?
Yeah, the thing I like about these sets is that they have little cubbies, foam cubbies for each stick. So as I use a stick, I just tip it up in that little cubby. So I know that I've used it and, you know, I can grab it again. So this is a hard, just, you know, they're so handy to do architectural things, even though I'm not drawing a building, I'm just indicating shadow. And I'm just working sideways with the stick. I'm not drawing down, I'm just skimming it sideways.
How many hours a day do you paint?
Well, it depends. You know, we have a store that's open 7 days a week. So when we're in town, I'm there every day for a while. And then I slip away to come paint when I can. So I can't really answer that.
Blocking. Blocking.
Okay, I gotta get in close for this, guys. I don't really have black in the set, so if I need a black, I'll use charcoal because it's so soft. Such a soft black, and sometimes, you know, it's easy to control it and if I goof up, I can wipe it away pretty easily.
When composing, do you consider each value, color, and temperature in deciding the ratio? For example, if it's 3/4 dark and 1/4 light, it's also 3/4 warm and 1/4 cool.
That's kind of what's happening here, I think. You know, this is a dark painting. It's, you know, end of the day, there's just a little light hitting these. So this is kind of 3/4 dark and 1/4 light, and it's 3/4 cool and 1/4 light. So sometimes, you know, that just happens. But a lot of that, I think, if you're working from a photo, a lot of that happens as you compose with your camera, or you're struck by a scene. You know, why is that scene speaking to you? There's something about it. You know, it's the composition is just naturally there sometimes.
Do you pick a palette ahead of time for each painting?
No, I don't. I just grab the colors I need out of the box. I think if you're learning about color, that's a good thing to do, because it can be overwhelming to have so many colors.
Okay. So Maggie White got to this quicker than I did, but how do you set up how do you set up your initial palette?
Well, I tend to paint the colors I see when I'm out, you know, plein air painting. I paint the local color, and when I'm working from a photo, I probably push the colors that I see, but I tend to use the colors that I see in the photo. But sometimes with a cityscape photo, everything's kind of gray and blah, and I like to push those colors. Like I'll make one side of the street very warm, use lots of reds and terracotta and so forth, and then make the opposite side cool, but I'll bounce a little bit of that back and forth. But I don't really like pick out my colors in advance, and I think that's absolutely fine. That's just not the way I work.
Says, do you work in any other medium?
I work in oil and pastel. I do so much plein air painting, and I use pastel so much for that more of my work is now pastel. I grew up as an oil painter, but it's just so fast. Pastel is so fast that I've come to rely on it for demos and plein air painting.
Okay.
That's too intense. So I got a color back there that's way too intense for being in the distance. So I got to tone that down.
Okay.
Another thing about the hard pastels is you can use them as a little shovel kind of and scoop some of the pigment out of the way, or, you know, just do windows this way just by going sideways with it. So they're fun sticks to have always on hand.
Okay. Okay.
How's our time, Ron?
We've got about 35 minutes left.
Okay.
Walking. Did I see you were recently in a magazine? If I'm correct about this, which one was it?
There's
Walking.
the Plein Air magazine that is
Walking.
the August issue just came out, and the article is about pastels are perfect for plein air. So,
Walking.
and in that, along with some good pastel buddies of mine, so it's quite a thrill to be included with them.
Can we see the reference photo again?
Sure. Oops. It's getting dirty. Okay, so let's see. I gotta hurry.
Walking. Walking.
Okay, any questions?
Do you varnish pastel paintings?
No. Actually, pastels are the most durable medium of all because they don't fade or crack, but you have to put them under glass. And I always use AR glass, which disappears. It looks like museum glass, but if you use a good surface and it's mounted well, and you use good pastels, you don't have to worry about fading, so you don't need museum glass. But AR glass gives you the same effect.
What is AR?
It's anti-reflective, and it's not the old
Walking.
non-glare glass that
Walking.
was popular a while ago. It's not that. It looks like museum glass. It just kind of disappears.
Walking.
Okay, so spend a little too much time on that.
Do you use spacers?
Yes, so you need to use spacers of some sort, and by that I mean the acrylic spacers, or you can use you can stack frames, like or use a fillet, which is that little piece of wood that is sometimes decorative between the frame and the glass and the pastel. So you just don't want the glass to touch the pastel.
Since when you frame, do you use double mattes? Can the inner matte be colored or just white?
I haven't matted my pastels for years. I frame them like oil paintings. So I'll use a linen liner or an inner frame and then an outer wider frame that forms the space. I mean, it's fine to use mats, but you know, they can get soiled easily, and especially if you're shipping work, you have to be concerned about mats getting soiled.
Okay.
So I'm just, you know, changing the hue a little bit, but keeping the value dark to suggest that there's detail in these buildings without putting detail in.
Says, what product do you use to set the finished work?
I don't spray. I just, you know, frame as quickly as I can. I just, if you spray your pastels, it just deadens the color. Then you have to kind of repaint. So I just don't do that. But you do have to protect them. You can protect them with glassine or something if you're out plein air painting and, you know, you have to get on the bus or transport your pastel someplace. Just you can use wax paper or glassine to transport it.
It says, I see the car on the left, lower left front is not straight, but it is an angle which really works. Is this the true perspective?
Yeah, it's actually, I think they're about to do a U-turn. So can you see? Well, you can't see it very well, but the car is angled, which I think is kind of fun because it is jutting into the picture plane. Let me see if I can straighten it out a little bit. I'm running out of time and there's still a lot to be done.
Blocking. 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 Can you explain inner outer framing?
Sure. I don't have an example here, but so if you put the finished painting in a narrow frame, maybe a 3/4 inch frame or a linen liner, inch wide linen liner, and then you put the glass on top, and then you put a wider frame outside of that. So that inner frame serves as your spacer. It's called stacking, frame stacking. We do that a lot in our frame shop, and it's real effective.
Do you try to knock off loose pastels before you frame?
I do. Sometimes when I'm out plein air painting, I'll just kick the back of the panel and, you know, really jar it off of there.
Not blocking. Will you post the finished product?
I will. yeah, there's lots and lots of pieces on my website, NancieKingMertz.com, and products are there. My workshops are there. And I hope some of you will join me in some of those workshops. We've had, with this Zoom, we've had lots of great travels. We've been to Monet's Garden and to Italy and to Ireland. We're going to Greece middle of August. And it's been a lot of fun.
So after the painting is in the smaller frame, then the glass goes on the outer larger frame?
Yeah, the glass fits into the larger frame, and then the package with this narrow frame and the artwork goes inside that. So you stacked a frame.
It says museum glass combines both anti-reflective properties and protection from the light. Is only the anti-reflective part necessary?
If you're using good pastels and good paper, yeah, the pastels typically don't fade if they're good. I mean, you don't ever want to put any art piece right in the sun. You don't want to hang it in the window. Although, I have a lot of my pastels in our window at our shop, but it's not long term there. So so yeah, you don't have to worry about the UV protection so much.
That sounds very cool about the framing.
Yeah, I love that method. I love the look of it. And sometimes pastels don't get their due notice because they aren't oil paintings. People think there's more value for some reason in oil paintings when pastels are the very same pigment as oil. But I think it's sometimes matted work people feel doesn't have the same value as an oil painting, and so we're constantly fighting that and trying to raise the perception of pastel because it's just such a wonderful medium.
So the Ireland workshop was absolutely fun and educational.
Oh, good. Is that Kathleen?
No, it's Carol Puchnowski.
Oh, Carol, hi. We had a great time.
Thank you for the generous demo. The work is wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And I like your COVID self-portrait on the website.
Yeah, Jimmy Wright, he's the president of PSA, which is Pastel Society of America, encouraged people to do we were in lockdown, to do a self-portrait. So got out the mirror and did that.
It says, I've gone to France, Italy, and soon Greece. I love Nancie's workshops. Hi, Nancie. Suzanne Leslie.
Oh, Suzanne, hi. From California. That's a wonderful thing about Zoom is that, we're just connecting all over the country and forming great friendships.
Okay.
Okay, I haven't gotten these guys in here yet. I want to go have a beer.
You were the guys.
Yeah. So when you're doing figures, it's wise to get them, this guy kind of disappeared, but it's wise to get them in there when you're doing your underpainting so that they don't look like you've pasted them on. So this guy had, I got him in when I did the one underpainting, so he's pretty much established. This guy, not so much, so I got to get him in, but make him look like he's, you know, part of the landscape. So
Will you have this demo on your website?
I will.
Says Lake County Pastel Society really missed hosting you this May. Looking forward to our rescheduled workshop with you. Your demo is truly inspiring.
Oh, great. Thank you. You know, it's just so fun to do something you love and share it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So, you know, I'm just kind of suggesting these guys. I'm not really drawing them in too much. Of course, no features are there.
I'm enjoying seeing how you take a picture and make it into a lovely pastel.
Oh,
Now I have a better appreciation of how you really do your art. I'll treasure your pastels that I have even more. Vicki Warning.
oh, Vicki. Hi, Vicki from Arizona. I miss you.
And could you show an example of the layered framing you mentioned earlier, maybe at the end of your website
Oh, gosh. I don't have
or on your website?
anything here to show you. If you want to private message me, I could send you a photo tomorrow from the shop. I just don't have anything here to share. I'm at home in my studio, and all the framing stuff is at our shop. So just send me a message and I'll send you a photo.
Message via an email?
Yeah, email or text or whatever works best.
This has really been wonderful. I took your workshop through PSA in New York City, either last summer or the year before. It's all become a blur. Thank you for a great refresher.
Oh.
Elaine Denton.
Oh, thanks, Elaine. Yeah, I sure miss these face-to-face workshops, but
Not blocking.
this, you know, the workshops we've been doing on Zoom are pretty close. So I provide 21 hours of instruction over the 3 days. So we spend a lot of time together, and everybody seems to do some great work. So.
And the person who asked about the example of the layered framing says they will do as far as sending you an email
good.
or whatever.
Okay. Okay, how's our time?
You got about 17 minutes.
Okay.
How do you sign up for the Greek workshop?
It's on my website, nanciekingmertz.com, and you can pay with PayPal or call the shop and put it on your card, however you want to do it. Love to have you. So the Greek, all the workshops I do, demo for like an hour and a half. And I send everybody photos that I took when we were in that particular country to use if they need to, or they're welcome to use their own from that country. And so in the morning I do the demo. We have a kind of a lunch break for half an hour. People get set up and start painting. And they paint for 3.5 hours. And then we have a group critique from 4 to 5. And that's each day for 3 days. So it ends up being, 7-hour days. And it's amazing though how the work grows. By the time those 3 days are up, people just do great work.
When will the information about Giverny in 2021 be available?
There's a little bit of information on my website. Gosh, I just hope and pray that happens. It was supposed to be this year, and of course they had to cancel it. So I just have my fingers crossed, because that's like a dream come true. Get to paint in Monet's garden and spend all that time in Giverny.
Says the Greek workshop is online, virtual, correct?
Yes. It's 21 hours online over 3 days. And then in October is a 5-day workshop sponsored by Pastel Society of America. And that's New Orleans. So we were supposed to go to New Orleans and that was canceled. So they moved it to an online workshop.
Okay.
So let's see. Guy looks like he's jumping up and down. So I'm just touching up this rail up here. Often students will paint an element like this black because it's in silhouette and it looks black, but it's not. If you make it too dark, it's going to pull your eye right up to that rail, and that's not what you're trying to feature. So,
what does dry mount mean?
Dry mount is you have a rigid surface and you put an archival heat-sensitive tissue on top, and then you put the paper or canvas on top of that, and then stick it in a press, heated press.
Blocking.
And you have a bonded surface then.
Okay.
I just looked over at the screen, and this looks so much darker on the screen than it really is. So please check my site because we'll have a better photo of it for you to see. Another thing, people often paint a white sign white, and if it's facing away from you and in the shadows, it's not white. It's probably blue or violet.
This has been so much fun. The colors are fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Been fun for me. Really appreciate everybody signing in on this.
Got the online workshop, for example, Greece. What will the setup be like today, as the quality is not that great?
Yeah, this is kind of our our setup. But I send everybody videos of the demo, and then I also send pictures of the completed piece. So, you know, you do get, eventually get to see what it's really like. But I'm also going to experiment with using my iPad as the camera that's right over my shoulder to see if that's a little better color. So I wanted to get through this demo, and then I'm going to experiment with that and see if we have better luck. Because I want it to be as positive for everybody as possible.
What is the hardest color to do with pastels?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. If anybody has a comment on that, put it in the answer, and so we could answer that, because I don't know.
And a comment that your iPad will work better.
Okay. Well, hopefully I can get that organized for Greece.
Right now, you're working on a photo. Did you print it on photo paper from printer or have it developed? And do you also use iPad instead?
I don't like to paint from a device. I've grown up, you know, when I do paint in my studio from a photo, it's always been a 4x6 photo. And that's just what I'm used to. You know, I know a lot of people paint from their devices, and they, you know, Photoshop their pictures and so forth. I just take stuff to Walgreens. If I get some photos on my phone or iPad that I really like and want to save, I'll just print them out at Walgreens. But I'll see students working from their iPad or phone, and they'll expand the image so they can see the whiskers on the squirrel. And you don't need to get the whiskers on the squirrel. You know, it just... So I don't want to be tempted to expand the image to get detail, because I just want to suggest things. I don't want it to be too literal, too defined.
Since I find that getting the right color red in a stick is hard, I always have to use two different sticks. Is it just me?
No, and that's fine to layer the color. I think it's a good idea to layer the color. It makes it richer.
And wow, I love the depth that is coming into this painting. I love the painting.
Oh, thank you. You know, a lot of people, going back to that question, what's the hardest color to paint? A lot of people really struggle with greens, and that was our focus on the Irish workshop, was to, you know, study greens and realize how much atmospheric perspective is there. You know, in Ireland, the greens just go on forever. And often people will paint something green that you don't, a color of green that you don't really even see in nature. So, you know, if you can play with the greens and make them cool in the distance, you know, put blue or violet in those greens, and then warmer as they get closer to you.
This is a wonderful demo. Thank you so much for sharing your talent and knowledge with us, Nancie. I just love your paintings.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, to the Wheaton Library and the DuPage Art League. This was a fabulous program. Very much appreciated.
Thanks to everyone that made this happen.
Marking. Oh, it's kind of a long one.
Huh?
Okay, I'll come back to this one. It says, do you use the same color of underpainting on foreground as the underpainting, or is it different?
When I do the underpainting in the darks, I try to use the same value but different hues, just so it's more interesting. So I'm giving a little reflected light from this light shining through up on this dark edge.
Okay. This is fantastic. I really do like Nancie's urban paintings, bold, expressionistic, direct, inviting the viewer to participate in the painting. The other reason I wanted to watch this workshop. I usually do not blend or use alcohol underpainting, but I'm now revisit blending and use alcohol during the painting. Thanks. Are there more videos on your style of urban painting? Will you have workshops specialized in urban settings? Where can I find out more about these? Online is fine. Some suggestions for your camera person for future reference. You might want to consider setting your camera to one side and a little bit above to avoid Nancie's head. Putting the reference image near the painting so we can see all the time. Keep things in focus. I think her head messes up the autofocus. Oops, wait a minute.
Oh, okay. Oh, because of the movement of my head.
Yeah. More lighting on the painting as we cannot see much of anything in the dark shadows. Occasional close-ups of the dark areas, and that just would help our understanding and maybe close up your palette.
And close up to the palette?
And maybe a close-up of her palette.
Okay. So I could zoom over to the palette now if people want to see that again. I don't know that moving the camera any closer to the painting is going to help. Whoops. See that.
Question. Oh, thank you so much. You make it look so easy. Inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancie. It's a great demo showing step-by-step to do cityscape painting. Wonderful program.
Thank you. So I can show the pastels again in case somebody was late. So these are the hard pastels, Richardson hards. And then these are my 4 signature sets. The coastal palette is over here. Those 2 are combined. Put all the cools in one box and the warms in another box. And then this is the urban and atmospheric landscape set that they had me pick first. And I've merged those as well. So cools in one box and warms in another box. And those are on my website.
And a question, is this a Chicago picture?
It is. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what street it is. It's kind of West Loop. I don't think it's Randolph. And it's an older photo I have. So that's probably all changed by now. City changes so fast.
And that's from Vicky. And then Barbara Herring says, thank you so much, Nancie and Wheaton College. I've not used pastels for a long, long time, and you make it look so easy. I wonder if my old pastels would work as well as yours. Great demo, and the work, even at this stage, looks fabulous.
Well, thank you.
And it says you could also put the reference photo at the top of the chat.
Oh,
Huh.
how do we do that?
I don't know. I'm gonna write that one down.
Barry might know how to do that. She put the, I don't have a digital copy of the photo, so I'd probably have to take a photo of it on my iPad and then transfer it that way.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how we would put a copy of the photo in the chat. I think it's text only, but we could definitely look into something like
okay.
that.
Okay. All right. Let's see.
And Barry, you said I would have everybody's email, right? I could send them a picture of the picture and then also the final painting.
Yes, yes. If you like, I can send you the long list of all of the registrants' email addresses. Absolutely.
Okay.
And June Finnegan says, I was registered to take your workshop at Forgotten Coast in March.
Oh,
This has been a very nice alternative. Hope to see you again, maybe next spring.
well, I'm scheduled March 19th to teach down there, so let's hope we can all meet again.
You did a great job no matter what. Kudos to the cameraman as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Really good demo. Thank you, Nancy, for pairing with the Wheaton Library and DPAL for this educational and informative presentation. Love your work.
Thank you.
Let's see, there's a software that does that. I'm not sure what that refers to.
That does the photo on Zoom, the software they're saying, maybe?
Maybe we could scan it. Is that what we're talking about?
I think maybe.
Okay, thank you for generously donating your time. I probably won't get into the urban painting, but I learned a lot now that I can use my desert plein air work.
So I bet you're from Arizona, because there was a group from Arizona that came on.
And it says, I love that idea, Pat. I love the idea, Pat. And I would appreciate a final photo by email.
Okay.
Thanks. Primavera says vote.
Yes, vote.
Marianne Pauls says, thank you, Nancy.
Hi, Marianne.
We're out of time.
Are we out of time?
Yep.
Well, you are welcome to go a few more minutes if there are additional questions to answer, or if there are certain details that you want to be sure to fit in or explain how you will finish things off.
Well, I'm just, we'll probably look at it and, you know, tomorrow and just see what it needs to finish. But, you know, I keep it pretty loose, so I won't do too much more to it. Actually, there's some street lights that I'll try to get in here that are kind of fun. Might lighten this a little bit, and I'll work on this some, but I don't want that to be too developed, because that's not important. I just need the value shifts there and the color there. I don't need it to be real detailed. So I'll just play with it a little bit and get it sent out to everybody. So should we flip cameras and I can talk to people if they have Here's my dirty hand.
Thank you, Nancy. I hope to see you in Greece.
Good.
Why didn't you extend the rail up near the workers so that goes all?
Oh, yeah, it needs to go
building.
clear across. Thank you. Yeah, so the rail needs to go over here so they don't fall off this dangerous spot.
And a question of, what is the brand you use for the soft pastels?
They're all Jack Richeson's. The hard and the soft are Jack Richeson's. And they're my signature sets that are on my website. So.
Okay, lots of thanks to you,
Oh,
Nancy, and Ron, in both the chat and in the questions. Thank you so much for all of your time and effort putting this together and dealing with the really challenging format. I'm sure there were times that you wish that your arm was several feet longer and that your eyesight was telephoto
yeah.
to try and put in all of those details and not be in the way of the camera at the same time. Very, very challenging, but thank you so much for doing this for us tonight. Again, to all of you, thank you for being here tonight. We will go ahead and be putting this recording up on our YouTube page so that you'll be able to see it again or recommend it to others. It should be up in about within the week, we hope. That's the plan. And we will also be putting Nancie's website and some additional information in an email to you. Again, as we mentioned it towards the close of tonight, I'll be getting those email addresses to Nancie as well so that she can send you a real crisp picture of the finished product.
Yeah.
So unless there's anything else that you would like to say to everybody before we close tonight, I don't think there are any questions that weren't answered. You answered 133 questions
really?
and comments. So this was tough
So I was
tonight.
like, rubbing my belly. I can't
So,
when you're trying to paint.
so
I wish I couldn't do.
yeah, absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for doing that. But I think that is probably it. So lots of thanks again coming through in the chat and in the Q&A.